What is up, guys? Hope you're doing well. Welcome to another Bojin vlog. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about a principle that has been coming into my consciousness more and more, especially recently, right? And it is something that I find to be very, very vital, in accordance to my own message, my own plan of essentially living a life of greater alignment. I've used many names to describe it, but we're all on a journey here. Whether that is to just be a better, to become better versions of ourselves, or to improve our lives, to find happiness, to find meaning in life, whatever it might be. We're all on a journey here, and in respect of that journey, I wanted to share this principle with you today, and that is the principle of balance, right? And to kind of describe it, basically, what I mean by this is that my message, as you know, is to live a life of passion, to live life in a way that inspires you and inspires the people around you, to not waste your life, being, at the mercy of social pressures, like these invisible social pressures that have their effect on us all the time, pretty much, and to live a life of security, which basically masks all of the emptiness and the meaninglessness that we feel, and a lot of the times, many of us find ourselves subconscious to that. We find ourselves kind of a bit numb to that because we feel it all the time, and we have no choice but to numb ourselves against it, because what are you going to do, right? We all have to survive. We have to find a way to kind of just live life, right? But in accordance, and so my message, just to recap again, is for you, to find happiness in life, to find meaning in life. There are the people who wish to just essentially just take it easy, just not rock the boat, just live a life that is simple and safe. And that's fine, that's one type of person, even though I can get a bit heated when it comes to social conditioning and all of that stuff. I'm in no position to judge those people, hey, it's your choice, I respect it, right? But then there is the other type of person who wants something more out of life, right? And of course, even that is a bit vague, how much more do you want out of life? I've experienced other people who will go all out, they have so much ambition, they just want to do so much in life, and it's in particular avenues as well, but and I have my own kind of unique, mixture of what I think is a good life, but even so, the type of person that I try to address, or rather that I want to address in these videos, is the kind of person who wants something more out of life, who isn't satisfied with the status quo and just living life without ever truly knowing or trying to understand what life is all about, and trying to forge a better life. That is my message, right? And in accordance with this, I teach many things such as tapping into your sensitivity, because I believe that if you really want to live a life that is worth living, you have to be sensitive to your feelings, right? You have to be connected to life. You have to feel, right? Because we all live in an abstract society that sells us many ideas. There are many stories disguised as magic pills, essentially. Follow this procedure, or these techniques, and you'll find happiness, or swallow this pill. And it's all about selling stuff, essentially, selling ideas to people. But if you truly want to experience life, you have to become sensitive to your feelings. So that is one of my number one messages, that I have to give on this channel, is to tap into your sensitivity, right? And then in alignment with that, I talk a lot about finding your joy, going in the direction of your joy, tapping into sensitivity. 2 steps. You go in the direction of your joy. That's how you start. That's how you discover, yourself. That tends to be the first step of discovering yourself, is to go in the direction of your joy. Because many of us, live lives where we don't really know what we want. And that is really, another way of saying that we subconsciously feel that we don't deserve what we want. When you go far enough down the rabbit hole, after many years, or if you're quick on this stuff, months, if you've already been on the journey long enough, you'll discover that it's actually because we subconsciously believe that we don't deserve what we want in life. And that's why this is how the shadow is formed, essentially. This is how shadow is formed. Shadow motivation is when we subconsciously believe that we can't have what we want. So we form a rationalization that becomes subconscious. The creation of this belief, of this defense mechanism, becomes subconscious to us, and we start to layer all of these falsities around the belief, the simple belief that we can't have what we want. And it's very subtle and insidious how this happens, right? But it gets installed early on, and that's how we live our lives, right? And I want myself, and I want whoever's watching this, and everyone else really in life, to have a chance of finding themselves, to find their joy, And then the second step of tapping into sensitivity is to tap into your darkness, right? And this is kind of what this video is about, So ultimately, you have to kind of choose a path in life, whether that be, in career wise or whatever it might be. You have to kind of choose something in life that you dedicate yourself to. And that is what, videos like I've made, such as the one where I talked about myself, discovering myself to be a healer, type. That is kind of an articulation of, the purpose that I was put here to do, in a humanistic sense, right? In a physical sense. But as I've talked about in other entries, life is not so simple as to be, such that, you just focus on love and happiness and passion, and for that to be your experience all the time, right? We live in a reality of contrast, right? Which means that there are good days and there are fucking terrible days, right? And there is nothing you can really do about that, we tend to, in our moments of, silent desperation, you could say, just going through life, we tend to kind of just resist pain and fear and stuff like that, and like I mentioned, the way the shadow works, it all becomes very convoluted and confusing. What is actually something that is detrimental to me? Which idea is actually detrimental versus which is the idea that is actually helpful? And sometimes that can be flipped around. So it's very confusing, but it's also very extremely fascinating. But nevertheless, so we encounter the good and the bad, right? And again, this also ties into an idea that I talked about, and it wasn't my articulation, but and consciousness. I made a few videos about that, going into quite a lot of detail, which means that which basically talks about how we the way that we tend to approach the problems, the challenges, but also our kind of dreams in life is to kind of again have something that you decide to focus on and make that into your life's purpose. But the problem arises when basically we become imbalanced, right? That has been traditionally the problem with so-called all consciousness, is that all consciousness, so and consciousness is the inclusion of everything, right? And, or rather, all consciousness is this typical kind of mental paradigm that we have as human beings, where we think that just because one thing is true, the other thing has to be false, right? So for example, I am a loving person, therefore I cannot be hateful, right? I am an authentic person, that's why I can't. That's why I can't be inauthentic, right? I am an artist, therefore I can't be a businessman. Whatever the dichotomy is, right? All consciousness dictates that we must choose one or the other way to be, right? But and consciousness, which is the idea that the articulation by Teal Swan, of course, that I talked about in previous entries, is the acceptance of both of these things, right? Because we will come to discover, as we gain more and more experience living life, that there is good and there is bad. There are these things that are seemingly separate, completely black and white within ourselves. A loving and a hateful side. An authentic and an inauthentic side. A liberal and a conservative / judgmental side. All of this exists within us, and it has always been something that has basically been a blockade to us, when we treat these things as opposites. We cause our own suffering in this way, right? And unconsciousness is, of course, the expansion, or rather more accurately, the liberation of our perception, such that we no longer essentially punish ourselves for being the chaotic beings that we are. And I'm not saying that as some fucking starseed child, whatever. I'm not saying this as some kind of fucking woo tree hugger guy. Not to say there's anything wrong with that. Again, I don't judge, right? But I say this because I've experienced the opposite, right? And this is key to what I'm about to talk about, actually. So I'll get back onto topic in a second, but the reason I say this is because I've tried to be completely loving. I've tried to be completely enlightened, and shutting out all lower vibrational, influences. I've tried forcing myself to be a certain way, right? And I found that it just doesn't work. It makes me miserable. I feel stifled in my expression. I feel energetically so trapped when I think like this. No matter how noble the thing is, right? If you think in terms of if I'm this way, I can't be this way. Whenever you have the thought of I can't be this way, being this way is wrong, then you have a problem. And I say this from direct experience, from just trying all the fucking time to be a certain way. For whatever rationalization, it doesn't really matter what the reason is. Ultimately, you say this thing, and therefore you can't be this thing, and you push away from that thing, and it just causes you to be fucking miserable, essentially, and it doesn't work. And that's why I say this, right? And of course, I say this not to judge, anything as being wrong. And this is the beauty of unconsciousness, is that it is the disappearance of judgment, right? And judgment is an emotional thing. Judgment is essentially the subjective appraisal of something being wrong, right? It is when you have an energetic aversion, or aka resistance towards something, right? The logic, again, the mind thinks in terms of black and white. Is it right to be white, or is it right to be black? Does that mean that black is wrong if white is right, or that white is wrong if black is right? It doesn't really matter, ultimately, because a lot of the time these things tend to be arbitrary anyway. Who makes these rules up? yeah, maybe it's wrong to kill someone, but like, can you really say that there isn't an instance? Again, you know, I've made this argument many times, so it's not really that extreme, but like, can you, like, you know, there are people who are executed around the world, for example, and it's for the good of society. You know, I'm not saying that I advocate this kind of thing, but like, it just comes to show that like what we think sometimes, you know, it's quite arbitrary, and like, and therefore it's a bit superfluous. You know, the real essential, you know, what is really essential is the way that we feel. You know, again, this is another thing that goes towards, you know, understanding how we feel, you know, tapping back into that. But anyway, getting back on topic, you know, essentially, you know, what I mean by this is you have to, you know, you should pick something, you know, again, you know, I am someone who wants to live in accordance to love, you know, that is my ultimate thing in life, I guess, you know, like, I want to live a life that makes me feel good, you know, that inspires me, you know, that touches me. I want to connect with life in such a way that like inspires me, you know, inspires the people around me, you know. That is why I live, you know. But at the same time, I can't deny the fact that that life is quite harsh at times. That life is, you know, is cruel and unforgiving, and like human nature has both a saintly side and also a demonic side, right? That's ultimately what I'm saying. You can't ignore that fact, right? To ignore, you know, either side of this is a bad thing, you know. And a good, you know, a really good example of this, of course, you know, tying into what I just said, is, are humans inherently good or bad? Right? Are humans inherently good or bad? Right? And you can go back and forth on this question. You know, oh, humans are good, you know, but then they do some crazy shit, you know, some really cruel shit, like the Holocaust or something, and you're like, wow, humanity is really fucked up. It's like the cancer of the earth, right? But then like, and you're jaded and you're like, fuck humanity, right? You know, fuck humanity. And you become like a misanthrope. But then like, you see something like really like, you know, noble and beautiful and touching, and you're like, wow, you know what? I guess humanity was good after all. And you go back and forth on this cycle, right? But, you know, ultimately, you know, we can go back and forth in the cycle, but ultimately what this means is that humanity is good and bad, right? And you can't ignore this, right? And I give this to you because I want to give you perspective, right? You know, again, none of what I say is ever like an ultimatum. It's never like, you know, even though like the language I use, because it's spoken language, you know, it's just very final in that way. It's very kind of like, it sounds like an ultimatum when I say do this, don't do that, or like this is this case, that is that case, right? No, I'm just giving you a perspective, right? You know, if you yourself find yourself falling into this trap in life where like you tend to have like a glazed, like a rose tinted view on life, or you're just jaded as fuck, right? You have the people who are like really, you know, who are just so naive, you know, and that's putting it in a negative light, but like, you know, they're just really innocent in the way that they view life, you know, they see the good in everyone, you know, they want every situation to be resolved in like a harmonious way, you know, sort of like a fairy tale, right? You know, and like I have that side of me definitely, you know. But then there are the people who like get jaded as fuck, you know, just cynical, just like, you know, there's nothing like, you know, there's always a fucking like whatchamacallit, there's always a catch, you know, like some people just become that way, you know, and they like everything, there's a fucking catch for everything, you know. You know, there's always like, you know, the selfish gene, you know, like life and nature is always trying to like find the benefit in everything, you know. It's all about cost versus benefit, you know. And it's like both of these things exist, you know. Why like focus on one in particular, you know? And like again, this is not a judgment, because the way that we discover what I'm talking about is through discovering both sides back and forth until we construct an awareness within ourselves that, okay, actually both of these things exist. I have ample experience and evidence of both existing. You know, I've gone back and forth countless times, so I know that, like, you know, for example, humanity is good and is bad, right? Don't be attached to one over the other. Again, I myself, want to live a life focused on good and helping the world and healing people and stuff like that, and resonating with love. You know, that's what I've decided for myself. But I have to stop myself from being so naive that like I ignore all of the pain in the world, right? And to acknowledge the pain doesn't mean to be addicted to it. You know, that's the other pitfall that you fall into. You know, that's why people become cynical and jaded as fuck, right? You know, they just like let the pain can grip onto them so tightly, you know, that they become subconsciously attached to the pain. You know, it's like they can no longer, like, you know, of course this has become subconscious to them, but they can no longer picture themselves having a good life, or experiencing happiness, or experiencing peace, or experience a fucking moment in life where someone isn't trying to trick them out of their money or trick them out of their like love, you know, and they stop being able to experience this. But then, you know, the catch is that they are the ones who are manifesting this now, you know, because of their attachment to, like, you know, oh, human beings are evil and like everyone's out to get something, there's always a fucking catch, you know. They're the ones who manifest that kind of thing. And so, you know, I'm going to do an entry about this, actually. I'm going to talk about this, you know, in the next entry in more depth, but like this is just an example of why, you know, you shouldn't, there is, or rather I should word it like this, there is no need to attach yourself to either one. They both exist, you know. Go through the motion of resisting one or the other, you know. Of course this is all energetic, right? This is all energetic, this is all emotional. This is all about the way that you subconsciously feel about life. And of course that's very vague, the way that I put that, but like there's honestly no way of phrasing this, you know, that really gives credit to like how fucking deep this shit is, you know, how like valuable this shit is, right? But you go through, all I can do is give you like the kind of like broad strokes, like the kind of blueprint of how this works, but like, you know, again, to get into unconsciousness, to get into a state of balance where like you're no longer attached to one extreme or the other, to find a middle way, as Buddha said, right? You swing between the extremes. Swing between them as much as you fucking like, you know. Humanity is good, humanity is bad. Humanity is good, humanity is bad, you know. Or like, I'm authentic, I'm inauthentic. I'm authentic, I'm inauthentic. I'm loving, I'm hating. I'm loving, I'm hating. Go through that cycle as many times as you want, and eventually what will develop organically is an understanding that, you know what, this is just like a pendulum. You know, this isn't one event that's going to lead to the end of my life, or like, you know, the kind of you know, the kind of entrance into heaven where like nothing is ever bad anymore. No, like you learn that life is actually just this oscillation between what is desired and what is not desired, what is authentic, what is inauthentic, what is one and what is dualistic. You know, what is loving, what is fearful. This is our reality, dudes and dudettes. You know, this is how this reality works, you know. We are human, so we must commit to something in life, or rather, you know, this is what we can do to like connect ourselves, to decide on a life and a set of principles that we truly want to strive towards in life. You know, mine is love and healing and all that positive stuff, right? You need that northern star, right? But at the same time, don't resist, or rather, you will learn to not resist the bad stuff when it happens. You know, excuse me. And ultimately, you know, practically, this applies. This kind of leads on to, you know, like, don't let yourself be played, I guess, you know. Well, you know, of course, this will be like in terms of like the person who's overly idealistic and optimistic and naive and innocent versus the person who's overly cynical, jaded, you know, negative, nihilistic, you know, whatever you want to call it, right? Negative. You know, I'm the type of person who tends to be more optimistic in general. You know, like I'm not 100% optimistic. You know, I have my side that is cynical, which is, you know, which is great. You know, I'm balanced in that way, or rather, I have that side of me to balance me, right? But to the people who are like overly trusting, you know, overly innocent, you know, just wants to see the good in everyone, can't understand why there's conflict in the world, can't understand why people would want to trick other people or to be cruel to other people. You have to consider that, you know, when you make your decisions, you have to realize that some people will do that to you, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean that you become jaded as fuck. You know, that's how it fucking happens, right? Someone who's innocent and sweet and just wants the best out of the world and everyone, they get hurt and then they swing to their side. You know, fuck humanity. Everyone's just out to get me, right? Everyone's trying to trick me. Instead, just, you know, you get to a sweet spot eventually after swinging through those two extremes where, like, you know, you're okay, yes, I want to move in the direction of love. Love is what I'm about. You know, I'm about hope. I'm not about fucking meaningless war and conflict. You know, fuck that shit, right? You decide that, but then, like, you also, like, you know, you recognize, okay, but at the same time, there are people out there who will trick me. There are people out there who are mired in scarcity and, like, pettiness and, like, and, you know, they don't know any better, but, like, they will trick me, and that will affect me, right? And so I do have to set up some countermeasures, right? I do have to set up some defenses. You know, I don't necessarily like doing this, but, like, and I don't have to go all out. I don't have to, like, start, like, becoming like a, you know, I made an entry about fighting against ghosts, like, just like people who become so fucking jaded, you know, that, like, all they're doing is, like, you know, and ironically they're, you know, like I said, they're attracting the negativity to their own life because they're so attached to it, right? They're so hard about it, right? But, like, you know, you just, like, okay, you set up the measures, you know, the minimal measures where, like, you know, you at least keep out the people who are going to fuck you over, you know, because they do exist, right? In the most loving way possible. These kinds of people do exist, you know, they're misguided, you know, you could use that rationalization, but they do exist. And so you need to make decisions that, like, that don't, you need to not be a doormat, basically, you know, you need to understand that, like, you have to look out for yourself. Some people, like, you know, they will make it so that, like, it seems as though they have your best interest in mind. No, only you have your own best interest in mind. If they want you to do something that you don't like, you need to be not naive enough to not fall for that. You know, and I know that's easier said than done, but, like, eventually you get to that stage, right? And of course, you know, for the more jaded people, you know, this is kind of a bit different, you know, because I'm not one of these people really, but, like, you need to open up, man. You need to stop being so fucking guarded all the time. You know, it's, you know, yes, the reason why you are so guarded is because you're scared, ultimately. You know, and, like, a lot of the times that fear becomes subconscious because you're so afraid of fear, right? You know, and I'm not trying to dig out anyone, like, you know, prod anyone here or, like, you know, scratch open, like, wounds, but, like, this is just for your understanding, you know, just for your perspective. You can disagree with me, you can hate me if you want, but, like, this is just my perspective, right? Yeah, you know, like, you're doing it out of fear, essentially. You're scared that someone will come in and hurt you, right? But, you know, sometimes you need to open up. And, like, this is actually advice that I need to follow a bit, actually. You know, me being, like, this optimistic guy, like, you know, overall, you know, I'm quite optimistic and trusting and stuff like that. But, like, I am quite guarded as well, you know. And so, like, I need to open up a bit, you know, to people. But, yeah, and if you can't trust people, or rather, like, if you can't afford to, like, just be, like, completely open to everyone and let everyone, like, just have their way with you, you know, then at least recognize what is worth investing in, right? You know, this ties to money, right? This ties into money, right? How do you invest money? How do you spend money, right? First, you protect against shitty decisions, right? You protect against, like, liabilities and things like that, right? So you don't fucking lose money, right? But then you need to know also, you can't just, like, fucking, like, never, you know, this is what you call a miser, or, like, you know, a tight person. You know, what's the word for it? There's, like, a word in Chinese, you know, guhon is like what it is in my language, like Cantonese, right? Guhon means someone who's tight with their money, someone who just doesn't want to spend their money on anything, you know, just really just like, pinch every penny or save every penny, right? No, like, you know, you can't do that because, like, you'll, like, end up with no money, right? You know, money will stop coming in, right? You need to know what you want to invest in, and to do that you need to connect with what you love, connect with the kinds of people that resonate with you, connect with, you know, what you're passionate about, what you believe in, right? And you have to take risks in those areas, right? So you need to take risks, because, like, you know, the person who's jaded and cynical will give you a million reasons why this decision that you're gonna make is risky and it's gonna end up in failure, you know. And you need to, like, you know, recognize when they're being dogmatic. Again, you know, and that's another way of expressing it, you know, people who are just fucking dogmatic, right? You know, they're being cynical for the sake of being cynical, you know, essentially. Or, like, you know, optimistic for the sake of being optimistic, you know, and not using proper judgment, you know. Another concept I talked about, you know, in previous entries is the idea of discernment, right? You know, you need to learn, like, how to move forward in an effective way, you know, not necessarily what is good or what is bad, right? You have to pick the way that is right, right? And that lies somewhere in between those two, you know. But yeah, you know, and you need to make calculated risks, or risks that are worthwhile, right? You know, whether that be opportunities that are that might be lucrative, I guess, you know, from a monetary standpoint, but like from my perspective, like things that you love, you know, invest in the things that you love, invest in the things that you're passionate about, you know, invest in those things, man. Don't hold back, you know. Again, you know, hold back is like, you know, so that you can survive, you know, hold back so that you have a bit like saved over in case of a rainy day, you know. Again, you know, this is the thing, right? But then invest when it's ready and when it's worth it, right? And then move forwards in this way. So cool. That has been my entry, you know, my message of finding balance in your life, right? Life is good, you know, but it can also be bad, you know. People can be trustworthy and noble, but they can also be cunts. They can really be cunts, people, you know. You know, self-destructive cunts, you know, like even worse, like unaware self-destructive cunts who don't know what the fuck they're doing, like don't realize that they're hurting themselves and other people, right? People can be like that, but like, you know, what I want you guys to do, and what I'm trying to do in my own life, is to find the middle way, to find, or rather like to discern and to move forward effectively and to live effectively, right? To make the right decisions. So cool. That's been my entry. I hope it's been insightful. And I hope to see you guys in the next entry. Peace out, guys. Have a good day.